Hi everyone, I want to talk about Diablo Immortal class choice. So I'm sure that most of you have probably seen something already, be it on Maxroll or watching some videos on people making class guides. And I want to talk about the class choice, how much it matters, and the different specialties of each of the classes. So we do have full class guides with different builds here up on Maxroll. So if you want to go check them out, you can go to the build guides. There's individual class guides for all the different activities you can filter. And we also have those class overviews that are very helpful if you have no clue yet. And I'm going to go over these and just talk through the strengths and weaknesses of each of the classes a bit and just give you a bit of an overview so that you can maybe decide if you haven't yet. In general, what's important to know is that you should mostly decide on a class that you kind of just like based on the visuals, on the skills, on like the overall class fantasy. And I wouldn't really focus too much on the actual tier list, which I'm going to show in a second, which we also have here for, various activities. I wouldn't really focus too much on the strengths and weaknesses of each of the particular classes, because it mostly comes down to something that you enjoy. And you have to consider this is an MMO. This is not going to have like seasonal resets like Diablo 3 or Diablo 2. You are supposed to keep going forward with your one character all the time, keep grinding up, and there's going to be new legendary gems, there's going to be new legendary items, there's going to be maybe even new skills that all just change up the balance of things a little bit anyway over time, and there's going to be balance changes to all of those things as well. So you can't really expect that one class will be performing way above the rest at all times, because, well, an MMO will simply fall apart if that happens. So they cannot make things too imbalanced anyway. So what I'm trying to say is that despite certain classes right now looking stronger or worse than others for certain activities, that doesn't mean it will stay that way. So the balance will shift depending on the game updates. In addition, there's also gonna be a class change feature down the line. I expect this will probably, be available after the first weeks or maybe months of the game's launch. So you will actually be able to change to another class and keep most of your progression, like the paragons, like the gear upgrades, and all these kind of things, so that you don't actually have to start over from scratch when you decide to play another class. And then you can also swap it back and forth with a bit of a cooldown. So you will actually be able to explore all of the classes eventually with the one character that you are playing anyway. So you only have to stick to it for a certain amount of time at a time. Anyway, the 6 available classes in Diablo Immortal are the Barbarian, the Crusader, the Demon Hunter, the Monk, the Necromancer, and the Wizard. And those are essentially exactly like the classes in Diablo 3, minus the Witch Doctor. And they also have very similar abilities. So if you know Diablo 3, then you will know those classes. You understand a little bit of what they are about. And they all have like a very defined theme to them. So, Barbarian is like a melee type of guy. Wizard is probably more ranged and squishy and, can move around very fast with teleports and these kind of things. Monk is also melee, and you have some kind of a holy and support abilities. So I guess that all just comes natural to give you a bit of an idea already of what they are about. Now, some of these classes have a bit more build variety than others. So you have a very particular set of skills, and you have to use this to your advantage and to your success. And for example, on the Necromancer, you have a lot of stuff balanced around like summons. So you can summon skeletons, you can summon the golem, but there are also other like corpse builds and like just spell builds possible. So on Necromancer, you do have a lot of variety. But if you're talking, for example, about the Demon Hunter, you do have some skills that are just like universally really good, like multi-shot, that you're gonna have in pretty much every build. The same goes for example, the Monk, who has Exploding Palm and Seven-Sided Strike, which are 2 of your main nuke abilities. You have the Mystic Strike, which is like a short dash that basically fits in everywhere. And you also have a lot of support skills that are basically only worth in group play, if at all, and some rather weak like offensive skills. So most of the Monk builds, for example, are actually fairly similar, and they only swap out maybe 1 or 2 skills. But it has like a very nice fast-paced playstyle in general because of that. Then you have, for example, the Crusader, who is very focused on the draw and quarter, which is the horse that you can summon to ride around and drag enemies with you while attacking them. This is like the bread and butter of a Crusader. You just stay on the horse as much as possible, and this is basically the same for all of the builds as well. And then you try to weave in different like AoE abilities. The Barbarian actually has different abilities that you can use in different circumstances, and also a lot of group buffs. So you can buff your teammates, you can debuff enemies, while also dishing out a lot of damage. But on the other hand, you will have to stay in melee range to actually deal significant damage and be useful to the party. So this can be a downside, for example, in difficult encounters, in high challenge rifts, in raids. And yeah, you have to kind of like find a balance between offense and defense there. And finally, on the Wizard, you have a lot of cool different abilities that also in some cases interact with each other to make like a combo. You have a lot of skill shots. So this is a kind of like more difficult class, I guess, rather squishy. So this is something where you try to stay out of harm's way while executing your combos properly. In terms of the overall damage output, most of the classes are fairly similar, I would say, but they excel at different activities. For example, Demon Hunters and also Necromancers, to a slightly smaller degree, are considered like the main single target DPS characters. So if you're making a dungeon group or raid group, you'll be able to dish out the most damage on bosses, and you typically want to have one of those two in the group just to make sure that bosses melt really quickly. And then you want to combine this usually with some really big AoE damage, something like a Crusader who can charge forward and soften up the big packs of enemies already with lots of AoE damage, or similar to the Wizard who has lots of great AoE abilities, or even the Monk with Exploding Palm. You can always dish out a lot of damage on big packs, but this comes with the downside of having rather mediocre single target damage on those classes. So not only do those classes have different strengths and weaknesses, but they also just behave and feel very different. As I mentioned, for example, the Wizard with all the different skill shots, you really have to be aware of, your character's positioning, your enemy's movement, and also you have to aim properly, because if you miss your shots, then you're just gonna get roasted. While, for example, on something like Barbarian, you have to more micromanage your HP. You have to try to, not take too much damage while you're in the fray. And otherwise you have a very easy time controlling your character and your abilities, because you can just like whirl around in the middle of the enemies. And yeah, you have to just watch out for different things. Similar on a Necromancer, you might have to control your minions, you have to reposition them maybe, or resummon them even in the right spot so that they actually attack the right targets. And for example, on the Monk, when you play with Exploding Palm, you want to make sure that you palm up the small enemies so that you can finish them and explode the rest of the pack. So each of those classes has, different like secrets to success, I would say, that are actually very important. So in the end, it really comes down to what kind of player you are, how you feel comfortable, managing these different difficulties that each of the class has. In any case, if you're interested in the actual high-end performance of each of the classes, at least with the best knowledge that we have from the beta, you can also go check out the different tier lists that we have here in the top of the Diablo Immortal menu. So we have the challenge drift, the dungeons, PvP, raids, and speed farming. And yeah, you can see that, for example, Demon Hunter is really strong because of the high single target damage. But for example, again, you are a rather squishy class, so this might be a bit difficult for people that have trouble dodging different difficult attacks. But for example, in PvP, things are a bit reversed, where, for example, again, the Demon Hunter is rather towards the bottom because of, how immobile they are and how squishy. So if someone just charges into them, they have very little ability to outplay. They just have to make sure that, you stay far in the back, you try to aim your shots properly, and try to stay out of harm's way. But if the Crusader just charges in with the horse, then you're going to be in trouble. In the end, it also comes down to just your ability to play around the different strengths and weaknesses of a class. So make sure that you go check them out. In the individual class guides, I will have them all linked in the description. Otherwise, go on the Maxwell website, read up on the individual builds so that you get a bit of an idea if you haven't decided yet. And as I mentioned, it's not a permanent choice. You can change it later, and you don't really have to despair about, the class that you chose, that you started out with. if you don't like it all that much, you will be able to change it. If after all of this you really don't know what to play yet, then I can also recommend you that when the game actually launches, maybe take a few hours or so to try out the various classes that you might want to play, and just level them a little bit, get a bit of a feel for how they are, how they work, and then decide on one and stick to it until later when you might want to swap to a different one. You definitely don't want to spread out your playtime between different characters. This is just not how Diablo Immortal works. You don't have alts, you don't have twinks, and yeah, you're gonna be focusing on one class mostly. And I'm gonna leave you with this. Hope you got a bit of an idea. Maybe make your choice now. And as I mentioned, go read up on the individual classes if you want to choose one of them and learn more about how they work before launch. Hope you liked this video. Subscribe for more Immortal content. Stay tuned for more videos, and I'll see you guys next time.